Agents at the border are preparing for what could become a deadly summer for adult migrants making their journey into the U.S. According to a report from the Washington Post, migrants traveling north are taking treacherous routes to arrive at the southern border, including paths used exclusively by narcotics traffickers. This as the number of adult migrants in the U.S. is rising. Customs and Border Protection took more than 111,000 into custody in April. That is the highest in more than a decade. Nick Miroff has been following this story. He is a reporter for the Washington Post covering immigration enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security, and he joins us now. Nick, talk to us about why Customs and Border Protection is worried about this increase in adult migrants, specifically their safety for their lives this year.
Well, one big reason is that we've seen that number continue to grow. New data this week shows that more than 121,000 adults attempted to enter and were taken into custody in May. So that's an increase from April. And that also corresponds to a huge increase in the number of rescues that Customs and Border Protection has had to make along the Mexico border. We're on pace to see twice as many rescues this year as compared to last year in 2019.
What's driving people to make these dangerous journeys despite the obvious risks?
Well, we're in the middle of a historic influx across the border. We haven't seen border crossing numbers like this since the early 2000s. And I think, the pandemic economic fallout, as well as, perceived changes in U.S. enforcement along the border that has made it more welcoming for migrants to attempt the journey.
So how are Customs and Border Protection agents preparing to handle this potentially deadly summer?
Well, they're deploying more agents and having in Arizona a helicopter on standby, a helicopter rescue crew, knowing that more people are coming through the desert. And they're also, they've set up rescue beacons, and they're urging migrants to call 911 if they can, if they have cell signal and they're in distress and need a rescue.
Is that enough? Do they think that's going to be enough?
I think everyone is anticipating that this is going to be a very deadly summer along the border. We'll see both local sheriff's departments and other authorities also trying to partner with this effort. But, all signs point to, with the rising heat and the sheer volume of people attempting the journey, that this is going to be, a very difficult and deadly summer with an elevated number of rescues and far more people coming through really remote areas along the border.
You write that adult migrants continue to be the largest share of border crossers, and that a Trump-era policy that the Biden administration has kept in place may be playing a role in that. Explain to our audience what that means.
Well, a big factor driving this is the Title 42 of the Public Health Code that has been in place since the start of the pandemic. And under that process, migrants who are taken into custody, in particular single adults, are quickly returned to Mexico without any legal consequences or risk of jail time. And so what we've seen is a huge increase in the number of migrants attempting the trip again and again. And so as part of that effort to repeatedly attempt to enter, many are taking to more remote areas in order to evade capture. So this is a big difference from, the families and unaccompanied minors that, we often see in the images who are turning themselves into agents. With single adults, they're trying to evade capture. They don't want to be returned to Mexico, and so they're going to be going to some of these more remote areas through the deserts and mountains, where they're at greater risk of dying from exposure.
So the Trump administration never did get their wall completed, but they did add hundreds of miles of steel border barriers along parts of the southern border in Arizona to deter crossings. Can you explain what the fallout has been from that?
Well, there are hundreds of, as you say, hundreds of miles of new barriers along the border, particularly in Arizona. So far, indications are, however, that we haven't seen any type of effect from that barrier on where people are rescued and human remains and dead bodies are found. I've asked authorities who are confronting this problem whether or not they're finding, say, more people in areas that don't have fencing, and they say that there's, simply no evidence of that so far, and that they continue to, find human remains and, receive rescue and distress calls across the border, regardless of whether or not there are new barriers in that area or not.
Man, Nick, it's disturbing stuff, but it's stuff that we need to hear. This is part of the crisis at the border. Nick Miroff, thank you so much.
My pleasure.